if you recall the day one's lecture on original contribution to knowledge, then the major point of that discussion was that your research is not one of a kind. It is not one of a kind, and you are not expected to write one of a kind research. You don't have to invent gravity, or you don't have to reinvent the wheel in your MA or even in your PhD. So, the topic that you are working on, many people have already worked on that topic, and many people will work on that topic. You are part of a very long conversation. So, status quo means that where do my ideas come from? Basically, who are the people who have worked on the same topic, and from which perspectives, and so on. Next, formulate a problem. Which areas are ripe for further development? So, unless I know that what are the already existing discussions on the topic, on my research topic, I would not be able to formulate a problem. A problem comes when you find a gap, and I will slowly come, and this is the goal of the literature review, to identify that gap in the field. So, which are the areas that are ripe for further development? So, that is what is meant by formulating a problem. Defend the line of pursuing the inquiry, meaning why is this problem important to pursue? Again, if you recall day one's lectures, it is also important that we justify that why this line of research, why this line of inquiry is valid, and why it is important to pursue. That justification is required. Not all problems are research worthy. Next, compare the findings and ideas of others with your own, meaning how are your findings different from the findings of others in your field. So basically, you are entering into a conversation with people who have already worked on your topic. So how are your findings, your ideas different or similar or extension of what others have already argued in the field? Synthesis of the work of others. What did I learn? Meaning, what did I learn from previous researchers on my topic? So, if you can identify some trend of thought in your while researching on your topic, I mean, previously, if people who have worked previously on your topic, if there is a trend of if there is a trend of argument. So when you look at proposal abstracts for conferences, you would see that many references are clubbed together in one single bracket with semicolons. That is indicating that the writer is talking about some trend of knowledge in that particular field, and those people, those authors within that single bracket, they are the ones who have more or less argued, have come to the same argument. It's alright to come to the same argument following different paths. You may also come to the same argument as others before you, but your path, your methods may be different. Your material may be different. So synthesizing the work of others is basically what literature review, writing the literature review is about. You are not making a list or an inventory of people who have worked on your topic before you, but you are synthesizing the relevant work in your field. Next and lastly, demonstrates the accomplishment of the exploratory process, which means that what hasn't been explored yet, and this is the goal of the literature review, that is identifying that gap in your field. So every literature review, whether it's a social sciences thesis, where literature review is traditionally one single chapter, a separate chapter, or a humanities thesis, where literature review is not a standalone chapter, but it is integrated in every chapter. Whatever form literature review may take, this is the final goal of it. which is to
सीटी
identify the
सोशल
gap
साइंसेस
in
में
the
अलग क्या
field.
पढ़ा था, ह्यूमैनिटीज में इंटीग्रेट
Unless
करते
this
रहते हैं।
identification of gap in the field about your
लिटरेचर रिव्यू
topic
के चैप्टर जो
happens,
होता है
you would
सोशल,
not be able to formulate a research
मैं कैसे बोल रहा
question.
हूँ, ह्यूमैनिटीज में
So
इट्स
that gap
कंटिन्यूअसली
is the
इंटीग्रेटेड एंड
final
सोशल
goal
साइंसेज में
of
देयर इज
literature
सेपरेट
review.
चैप्टर ऑन दिस।
But not always a
ऐसा
So
तो
separate
नहीं
purpose
होता।
of a
chapter. It
literature
depends on
review
what
or
you're working
checklist:
on.
provide an
Because
overview
people
of the
take
central
things and then
debates in
divide
your
the
field.
chapters.
If there are central debates in your field, the purpose of a literature review is to provide an overview. Select studies relevant to your research. This part is also very crucial. Like I said, that literature review, I mean, there would be hundreds and thousands of people who might have worked on your topic, and you are not expected to write about all of them. Literature review is not a list, it's a synthesis. So, relevance is key. We have to choose the research that is relevant for our topic. Then, summarize the relevant studies of the past. Summarizing is actually an important tool of synthesizing various research work, and it's also an important skill. Then evaluate those studies, whether you are critiquing it, whether you are extending, whether you agree with their argument and so extending it and applying to newer and different contexts and so on. Establish a context for your topic. So literature review is also a context for your topic. Your topic is not something that has risen out of nowhere. Your topic rises from the literature review, from what already exists. So the literature review is a context. Last, then identify gaps, and finally identify a suitable method of analysis. So once you have identified that gap, that this is what this is where a new knowledge is required, you are also kind of expected to articulate that what method of analysis are you going to follow to fill that gap. Now, how to engage with the source and exercise and note taking. This is something very, very granular. Literature review, the writing process of the literature review is something very extensive, and it's a back and forth process. This slide is showing something very granular. So, what is it? Imagine you found Shivaji Bandyopadhyay's Gopal Rakhal Dialectic, Colonialism and Children's Literature in Bengal in the library. You are working on 20th century African American children's literature. Given your temporal and contextual differences with the book, what questions would you ask to evaluate its relevance? Now, this checklist can work for any source, whether it's part of your literature review or not. It can work for any source. But as far as your literature review is concerned, we have to check for relevance, that whether this book is worth reading, should I put in that effort to read the book, and how to decide whether that book is relevant for me. So our checklist is what were the aims and objectives of this book. So if it's a well-written book, the introduction will clearly state that this is what the book is setting to find out. This is what the book aims to do. This is what the book aims to accomplish. What were the findings? The conclusion chapter of the book will clearly state, again, if it's a well-written book, the conclusion chapter of the book will state that what the findings are. In humanities, I mean, findings is a more social sciences term for thesis writing and books. In humanities research, it's usually, the thesis statement, the argument, and so on. So the next point is that based on the findings, what was its central argument? And this third point is sort of a key point, and it's valid for any source. Any source you pick up to understand whether to read it fully or to check its relevance for your topic, it's vital that we understand what the central argument of the book is. What is actually the book is trying to claim? And both the introduction as well as the conclusion chapter will tell you that this is what the book is trying to argue. What method of analysis did the author follow? Is it applicable to other contexts? Again, the introduction will tell you, or the preface will tell you that if there, what is the mode of, I mean, how how question, that how this findings took place, that how these findings took place. Why did the author think that such a book needs to be written? This point, not many books, not all books might have this answer, but well-written books do have this answer. That why did the author think that such a book needs to be written? The justification for that book, which is basically the gap in study, the gap in knowledge, that why such a book was needed to be written. What was the book's contribution to the field of children's studies? Again, in both in introduction as well as in conclusion, there will be clear statements that this is the book's originality. This second last point is mainly about the book's originality. Does it have any connection to my topic? If no, why? If yes, how? And finally, after you have checked out all the previous 6 points, then you ask that if this book is now relevant to my topic. Here if you are working on African American children's literature and you are trying to find out the relevance of this book, which is about Bengal, then you can, from the title itself, you can understand that this book is vastly different from, the only point of connection is that both are children's literature. Now, is that one connection enough for you to understand whether that book is relevant or not? Sometimes it so happens that two sources may be very different from each other in terms of their time, in terms of historical times, in terms of the historical context, in terms of their participants, in terms of the people that they are trying to study, and so on and so forth. But the how question, that is the method of analysis, sometimes that method is transposable to other contexts. That what actually that kind of a common point makes a book quite relevant, even if that book is very, very different from what you are doing now, in terms contextually and also temporally. I mean, if the method of analysis, that point, what method of analysis did the authors follow? Is it applicable to other contexts? If this is something that can be applied and reapplied and adjusted and adapted to other contexts, then frankly it's a very good book and relevant, of course. So these are the checkpoints that you can use to see whether a source is relevant for you and whether you should actually take that effort to spend time on that book. Now next is approaches towards data and theory integration. Now data here, it can mean textual data, it can also mean field data. I mean, you are an interdisciplinary bunch, so please appropriate the meaning of data according to your discipline. So two major things, that data and theory, and sometimes the conundrum is that which comes first and how to proceed, in which direction I should proceed. Is it from data to theory or from theory to data? Let's look at these quotations from various books. I go to the field with questions of larger social significance. I do not apply theory to the data, but try to think through the data to refine or even refute and displace the questions I ended with. Next, I almost never know in advance which parts of the field goals will go into the text, because it takes me some time and a lot of writing to figure out my core argument, a process sometimes called grounded theory, a way of incorporating theoretical insights that emerge from the fieldwork rather than letting theoretical insights guide it. If you are starting next, the third Example, if you are starting with a clear argument, examine your field notes. Identify the ethnographic and or textual material that will best substantiate your claims. Then state your overall theoretical intervention in the introduction of your thesis. As you write up relevant examples from your notes, occasionally stop and return to your argument and theoretical framework, inserting bits of theoretical background among your examples. This is actually a very good book, From Notes to Narrative on Ethnography. If any one of you are writing ethnographies, then I think this is a book. This is a go-to book. So here you see three examples of three sort of approaches of how to go about your research topic. First, you may not have the first approach is that you do not have a theory in mind to where you would like your data to fit in, because there are no such theories where any data would seamlessly fit in. There has to be some adjustments. So you might want the textual or the field notes to speak to you and throw up certain theoretical conundrums which will help you make a larger social point, a larger point of social significance, or canonical significance if you're doing literary analysis, or historical significance, and so on. So, and then there is another method where you do have sort of a hypothesis, and you you have a theoretical lens through which you would like to examine your textual or field notes, and you select those parts of the notes or textual references that substantiate and fit in with the theoretical lens that you have chosen. So these are the two approaches that you can adopt while approaching your topic. So theory to data, you know what you want to argue, already have some projected conclusions, then you choose those data that substantiate your argument. Next, data to theory. Reading and writing from field notes to figure out the core argument rather than theoretical insights predetermine it. Both the approaches are acceptable. Now, depending on your topic, on the scope of your research, whether it's an MA or a PhD research, definitely your discipline, you should choose the approach. So theory to data, sometimes the flip side of this approach is that when you're moving from theory to data, sometimes you may fall into the trap of putting pressure on the text so that it fits your theory. That is not good research. Even if you have the approach from theory towards data and from theory to your text, then at some point you also should let the text speak back to the theory and see that how the theoretical lens or the theories that you are trying to through which you're trying to look at the material, those theories also sort of undergo some kind of a change because the text speaks back. The same for field notes or archival materials. You might have a theoretical lens in mind with which you want to examine the material, but clear some room for the material also to speak back to the theory. I mean, there are no theories in the world that can fit in any material or any text ever. Every theory, every concept has its own origin and story, has its own historical time and historical context of development, has its own history of development, and you are working in a separate context in a different time. So it is impossible to seamlessly the students frequently use the word apply. It is not a formula that you apply a theory to your material, to your text, to get the final result. It is not that seamless, otherwise, if it's that seamless, it is not good research. So, even if you approach from theory to data, let some room for the data to speak back to the theory, and showing that how the theories also undergo change because the materials speak back can be a very good way of foregrounding your originality. Data to theory, where you are completely, you're not reining in the data. You are letting the data speak for itself. And then you would see that what theoretical conundrums and what theoretical insights, what kind of contradictions that the text or the field work or the field data is throwing up, and then you theorize from that findings, from that data. So both those approaches are acceptable. Now let's look at an example. The literature around, this is an urban studies thesis. So the literature around creative adaptation in cities has been primarily focused on either the struggles of rural communities adapting to natural disasters or the social pressures faced by slum dwellers. See, this part is also a synthesis, example of synthesis. Remember that discussing the central debates of the field in the checklist on literature review. This is an example of that. It is important to distinguish that peri-urban villages are a distinct category of community from slums. Although they frequently are low income, they do not have the complete informality, lack of basic services, and extreme density found in urban slums. And though equally vulnerable to climate change, peri-urban communities are not quite as isolated as rural villages. Despite these differences, the theories of creative adaptation, which speak to the ability of individuals to find solutions to their own problems, appear to apply equally well to the peri-urban zone. So the first line on creative adaptation, the writer here is using the word adaptation and adaption interchangeably, I think. I checked this is not a typo or something. So the theory of creative adaptation, whatever that theory is, that is an existing theoretical framework that the writer is trying to use to fit in her studies on peri-urban societies. And the final sentence, the last sentence, is that the application of the theoretical framework, that this is what the application reveals, that the theories of creative framework, creative adaptation, also apply equally well to the peri-urban zone. So this is an example where the writer is moving from theory to data. So this is one. This is the content page of that thesis. This thesis. And see here the division of chapters. So acknowledgements, introduction, these are more or less consistent across any kind of research, any kind of thesis. Next is literature review, methodology, 2 standalone separate chapters. Then chapter 1, 2, 3, conclusion, work cited. And this is different from a humanities thesis, because in humanities thesis, like in literature, history, literature review and methodology are not standalone chapters, rather they are integrated in all the chapters. But the point of showing this very traditional social science thesis and its table of contents is that all these components, all these ingredients, literature review, method, etc., they are all present in the humanities research, humanities thesis as well. It's just that in the humanities thesis, the writing does not have a traditional structure. You can figure out your own structure of writing, whatever works for you, whatever kind of writing structure best
If you are
suits
doing
your
a
argument that you're trying to
experiment, then
make.
it's a different thing. But
But
if you are doing a
whatever your
literature
writing
review and maybe
style
some
is,
qualitative research, there are
however you
theme,
want to
and there
divide
are
the
three themes
chapters,
in your
there is
thesis.
always
So you
literature
will
review, there is
integrate
always
whatever you've
methodology.
done, and then there will be
So
a
it is
conclusion
important
chapter.
to keep
That's
in
the kind of
mind that
psychology.
even
In
though
social
we
science,
are
we have
not
different
writing
chapters on
standalone
themes.
chapters on literature review and methods, these components are present in humanities literature also, in humanities research also. So let's look at this. This is a literature review section from the literature review chapter of that thesis. And so let's directly go to the broken down same paragraph, um, indicating what is the function of each sentence. The first sentence: in this study of peri-urban Sangareddy, most of the observations that are identified as signs of urban transition are solutions that communities have found to face challenges presented by urban growth. For example, to combat rising labor prices due to competition with urban industries, some farmers are switching to less labor intensive crops like teak, sugar, and mangoes. So the first sentence is on findings. What is the finding? That signs of urban transition are solutions that communities have found to face challenges presented by urban growth. This is the finding. This is the observation. Now, this is also a very general statement. To make it specific and strong, there is an example. Uh, a use of example is actually extremely good and helpful to make your theories, to make your research grounded. So immediately there is an example to strengthen the point, strengthen the findings. Next, other examples of peri-urban creative adaptation will be identified throughout the analysis. So note the tense here. The tense is future tense. Will be identified. So there is one example. Other examples will be shown as the thesis progresses. This function is signposting. So the reader is already told that what's to come, what is to expect. The literature around creative adaptation in cities has been primarily focused on either the struggles of rural communities adapting to natural disasters or the social pressures faced by slum dwellers. This is the status quo, what the others have said. So, what is the traditional literature around creative adaptation? It is important to distinguish that peri-urban villages are a distinct category of community from slums. Although they frequently are low income, they do not have the incomplete informality, lack of basic services, and extreme density found in urban slums. And though equally vulnerable to climate change, peri-urban communities are not quite as isolated as rural villages. Now, this is author's point of departure from the existing literature. The existing literature has focused the theories of creative adaptation primarily on slums, whereas this author is trying to depart from that and saying that it is equally applicable to peri-urban communities also. Next, despite these differences, the theories of creative adaptation, which speak to the ability of individuals to find solutions to their own problems, also appear to apply equally well to the peri-urban zone. And this is author's claim or thesis statement or topic of the chapter. This is also this breaking down of a paragraph, breaking down the paragraph into each sentence's individual function is also a helpful writing practice that we can all follow. In PhDs or MA theses, in whatever kind of thesis, in any kind of research writing, there are no repetitive or redundant. Not repetitive. Sometimes repetition is fine, but some repetitions are actually required. But redundant sentences, there are no redundant sentences at all. Every line should have a specific function. So when you are when you have written it, remember that roughening cut and sharpening cut. So when you are at the stage of roughening cut, you write it down. When you are at the first stage of sharpening cuts, when you are, at the edit level one, when you are making substantive edits at the level of concepts and ideas and etc. It is a good practice to indicate just for your own reference that what is the function of each sentence. If you feel that there are one sentence, three sentences are doing the same function, then it's just fine for redundancy. You have to combine those sentences to make one single point. If it's about one single point. So this is also good writing practice to while editing that to note for yourself that what is the function of each line. Now this is another example where where application of existing studies, where theories are being applied, sort of applied, quote unquote, to certain studies. Bakhtin's observations about utterances could be applied to Ramayana tellings in different genres. This is also from, I should have shown, I think, the contents page of this thesis, but let me just tell you what this thesis is about. This is a very interesting thesis written in the performance studies department by a literary scholar. It's a very old thesis written in early 2000s, and it is quite interdisciplinary, where it mixes methods from literature, sociology, performance studies, history, and so on. The topic is the research. The topic is on the Ramnami community of Chhattisgarh, where they are a subaltern community, and historically being subaltern, they were denied entering temples, but they were worshippers of Ram. So because they were denied to enter temples to worship Ram, they tattooed the name of Ram on their whole body from head to toe. That is their that is their worship. And Ramayana being a text, sort of an elite text, practiced at least by the elite. The subaltern people were not allowed to worship Ram, so it makes Ram an elite deity. These are the subaltern performances of Ramayana. So this thesis is on that. So let's read this paragraph and break it down again. Bakhtin's observations about utterances could be applied to Ramayana tellings in different genres. This is a topic sentence. Bakhtin notes that utterances are not indifferent to each other and are not self-sufficient. They are aware of and mutually reflect one another. Each utterance is filled with echoes and reverberations from other utterances to which it is related by the community of the sphere of speech. In such a context, any one telling of the Ramayana can convey mixed or opposed messages when it is seen in the context of other tellings of the epic and of other performative traditions in the community. This is the application of existing studies. So first the writer has that theoretical lens from Bakhtin, and the next sentence is on the application of that lens to another context, which is here the Ramnami community, the various tellings of Ramayana. In the case of the Ramlila of Anandpada, the religious dimension of the performance places certain limitations on what can be depicted in the Ramlila. However, the performers manage to overcome these limitations by juxtaposing the Ramlila with other performances like nataks and spoofs, where the same limits do not apply. Thus, knowledge of how intertextuality and shared referentiality shapes meaning comes to be used to veil sentiments that could be considered inappropriate to one form of representation, and thus becomes a useful tool in the hands of oppressed groups seeking to express themselves through such subterfuge. So basically here the Ramlila being, basically what it tries to say, at least in my understanding, is that Ramlila is sort of an elite upper caste performance, and within this performance, these the Ramnami community uh, interludes with some nataks and spoofs, where where it becomes kind of a subterfuge, and they also get to perform certain stories of Ramayana. So here you see it is the same way where it is moving from a theoretical lens, from from certain theoretical, I mean, working within a certain theoretical framework, and trying to see a field or a material through that framework. But again, what I did, what I have been, what is not in this slide, but what I'm trying to, but what I'm really trying to foreground here is that this can never be seamless. So always do look for those moments of contradictions where the material of the field is speaking back to the theoretical frameworks and sort of readjusting it, reshaping it, expanding its scope, and so on. Those contradictions, those moments of contradictions and lack of themes actually are what are actually that makes research interesting and uh, worthy. So final thoughts. Who else have worked on the topic? Who else have worked on your topic? Basically, meaning establishing the context. What did you find? If there are any central debates of your field, like the one that I showed, this, what others have said. Evaluate their findings, then their applicability to your topic, basically justifying that whether those contexts, whether those frameworks, whether those debates are applicable to your topic or not. What did they not explore? Identifying the gap. And what do you want to explore? And why do you want to explore this gap? Which is your contribution to knowledge. This contribution to knowledge, which was covered to some extent in the originality module on day one. This is by far, at least to me, in my own experience, is the hardest thing to write. So I would advise that periodically think about your contribution to knowledge, because it's a most challenging paragraph that you would, or a section that you would have to write as part of your thesis. And putting it off for the last moment is not a good idea. From my own experience, I can say that. There is always some contribution. I mean, you can be sort of sure that if you are doing the research with due diligence, you do have a contribution to make. Otherwise, you would not have so much to write up. But packing the contribution up into a paragraph or two or even a section, I don't think even in PhD is a whole section on contribution to knowledge is required. But two paragraphs, maybe even three, that's required. And PhDs are actually evaluated on the basis, one of the criteria of evaluation is the contribution to knowledge part. And this is, and at least in my experience, is really the hardest thing to write. Again, when you are writing about contribution, there can also be various levels of contribution to knowledge. Your contribution might be at the level of theoretical intervention. You might be, your material might be throwing up some new theoretical insights. Your intervention, your contribution could be also at the level of methods. You might be combining various methods to look at a topic that has been worked on a lot. You might be combining interdisciplinary work concepts and so on to study something that has been studied a lot, and there may not be much need to say. But this interdisciplinarity is what makes that well studied topic interesting again. So your contribution might also be at the level of methods. Your contribution can also be at the level of findings if you have found out something exemplary, like something like gravity. I mean, if you can invent gravity in your PhD, I mean, please go ahead. But what I want you to know is that you are not expected. You are not expected.
Is it an app?
Huh? No, it's only a part. और इसका टेक्स्ट हेवी रहता है ना पीपीटी yesterday it was good.
Yesterday was good. It was really good. But इनका मुझे एक दो points थोड़े क्या तो मुझे लग रहा है मेरा literature review वाला phase चल रहा है तो when she talked about moving from theory to data, so she said that you need to have some background.
Hi, I think I got disconnected for a while there.
Let's discuss it once.
Yeah,
it's
later,
outside.
later.
Let's discuss it.
Yeah. Okay. What was the last thing that you heard? I was showing that screen on final thoughts. Okay. Yeah, okay. So, what I was about the contribution to knowledge part. Yeah, about gravity, what I meant to say was that if you really found something like gravity, great, but you're not expected because in a PhD or an no, MA, I mean, definitely not in MA, but also definitely not in the PhD. You are not expected to invent anything. You are expected to rediscover. So, contribution when you are writing that contribution to knowledge part in the conclusion chapter of your thesis, it's important to mark at what levels this contribution is taking place. Basically, the contribution to knowledge means that how your research is reshaping or changing or taking the discipline to a new direction, even by a little bit. So, how the field is expanding for the readers because of your research. That is where the contribution is. So, what new thing that you learned now that you did not know before? That is the contribution. So, basically answer to your research. So, marking the levels of contribution, whether your contribution is at the level of a theoretical framework, whether your contribution is at the level of method, whether your contribution is at the level of finding new materials, or a combination of all these three. It is important to say that how the field expanded for you because of this research. Even if that it's expanded by a little bit, but significantly, a significant expansion. So that is what contribution is. So I think I also lost the screen share. The next slide is actually on the writing task. Before I move on to the writing task, I think I would like to reserve the writing task for the last 1 hour. Defining theoretical framework with examples. Alright. No, I'm not sharing the screen at the moment. I mean that the slides that I was showing you the last is the last was the last slide. The next slide is on writing task, which I will share again in the last hour. So yeah, theoretical framework. See, by the very word framework, by the very word framework, it means that is something that you are constructing. A theory may be something which is existing. A theoretical lens may be something which is already existing. But a theoretical framework is something which is constructed, and it is you who is doing the construction work. So suppose if your research is interdisciplinary, and you are borrowing, concepts and methods from other disciplines, integrating these various methods and concepts from XYZ disciplines is what will help you to construct a framework. So a framework is always something which is constructed and not a given. So you are already on the path of that original contribution when you are making that construction. Maybe you can claim that this these methods or these authors or these concepts have not been brought together into a conversation before, and you are doing it in your research to look at a certain material. That construction of the framework is already putting you on that path towards originality and contribution to knowledge. No. The difference between theoretical framework and conceptual framework, not really. It means more or less the same thing. By the very word framework, again, theoretical framework, you are bringing in various theories to construct a structure, to construct a framework that will hold the material of your research. Conceptual framework, you are bringing in various concepts to construct a similar structure that will hold the research. It's like setting boundaries for a field, for a game.
I don't know what is
Within that field, rules apply and are valid, which means that you are kind of setting up a field within which certain findings are valid.
When you look at a theory,
Because this is also important to understand that so that you do not make tall claims and overgeneralizations. That your research is valid everywhere, in every context, in any time, by anyone. No research is valid like that. There will always be adaptations and adjustments and so on. So when I said that a theoretical or a conceptual framework is sort of creating a field within which certain rules apply, it means that within that framework only your findings are valid. Now, if you take those findings out of that framework, there might be challenges. So it is important to also write with caution that to what extent your research is valid. This is called hedging. Hedging means caution. So words like could, maybe, expected, words like that, those are the language moves that you can apply and we can talk about that later on the last day. What are the language moves that you can use to indicate that you are being careful, that you are not overgeneralizing. You are not making tall claims that your research is valid everywhere. No, your findings are valid only within that field of game. And that boundary is the framework. And the way you construct that boundary, that framework, that is already putting you on the path towards originality. Are there any apps or websites helpful in doing literature review? No, I don't. I mean, I did my literature review pretty manually. Apps, I think I do not know of any applications or websites that will help you do the literature review really. Um, One way that can work is that making an Excel with columns that this is a book, publication details, topic of research, main arguments, following that checklist. If you can have separate columns for all the points on that checklist.
इसे manually हो गया.
And when you have, say, 50 entries on that Excel, you would be able
मतलब
to
मेंटली
see
भी
that,
चीज होती है
you know, which, how you can group them,
नहीं ऐसे
और,
लोग कैसे लिखवाते हैं
which studies are vastly different from each other, but relevant to your topic and so on.
एक्सप्लिसिटली भी बोलता
So, I think Excel can help you do that, but literature review is a process that quite frankly you have to do with due diligence. It is actually a due diligence.
Websites.
Checking the status
आप
quo
उसमें
is
कीवर्ड
due
डालो.
diligence. You should know where your topic is
Also
coming.
with the flow.
Flow.
Like कौन कर रहा है, कौन
Yeah.
बाद में है.
Now, the next thing that I want to say, but I have absolutely no training in it.
मतलब आपको उनको मॉडिफाई करना पड़ेगा, but they'll give you
But,
the main literature तो मिल जाएगा.
How should we write the available studies on my topic? Come in a dialogue in my literature review. Again, the synthesis, you have to do the work of synthesis. Literature review is not a list, not an inventory. You are not expected to write about everyone who has worked on your topic. What you're expected to do is that you are expected to select relevant studies and group them. And from those groupings, find out that gap that you would like to fill, that you would like to explore. So, the writing part is you cannot open your laptop and expect that this is the first line or the first paragraph of my literature review chapter. That way it will never happen. You have to go more and more granular. And again, for now, I would suggest that if you do not want to maintain an Excel on your books, handwritten notes